Somebody's phone is down here underneath making noises. I don't know what that's all about. Good morning. Joining me are Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford and Chief Legislative Officer Kiefer Mitchell. The legislative session begins on Wednesday in the middle of an unprecedented global pandemic, which has caused devastating economic hardship for so many struggling Marylanders and small businesses. While Maryland's economy is coming back faster than many other states, America is going through one of the worst economic crises in our country's history. In recent weeks, I have had productive discussions with the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, along with also Republican leaders of both chambers. It is clear to all of us that the primary focus of the 2021 legislative session must be providing additional immediate economic relief to the hundreds of thousands of struggling families and the tens of thousands of small businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic. In the fall, as we were continuing to aggressively push out emergency relief and preparing with our hospitals and health officials for the next surge of COVID-19, I directed our team to explore every possible avenue to further ease the financial burden on Marylanders experiencing so much hardship, and to do whatever we can, even as we face unprecedented budget challenges, to allow them to keep more money in order to feed their families and to keep their businesses going. Amid so much suffering, the last thing we should ever do is raise taxes. So today I am announcing our top legislative priority, the Recovery for the Economy, Livelihoods, Industries, Entrepreneurs, and Families, or the Relief Act of 2021, which will provide more than $1 billion in immediate and targeted financial relief and tax cuts for Maryland working families, small businesses, and those who have lost their jobs and are suffering financially as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This stimulus and tax relief package will provide $267 million in direct payments to Marylanders in need. Families who file for the Earned Income Tax Credit will receive an additional $750. Individuals will receive $450. This relief will go directly to more than 400,000 Marylanders in need, and no application of any kind is necessary. These checks can begin going out immediately as soon as the Legislative Relief Act is passed by the legislature and I sign it into law. The Relief Act also commits another $180 million in targeted tax relief for Marylanders who have lost their jobs by repealing all state and local income taxes on unemployment benefits, allowing them to keep more money in their pockets. The Relief Act of 2021 also provides $300 million in immediate tax relief to help 55,000 Maryland restaurants and small businesses by allowing them to be able to keep up to $12,000 of sales tax over the next 4 months, which will keep much needed cash in the coffers of those small businesses, which enables them to keep their doors open and to keep more people on the payroll as we confront the next phase of the pandemic. Last month, I issued an executive order which immediately prevented sudden and substantial increases in unemployment taxes on small businesses. This new Relief Act legislation will codify that emergency tax relief for all of 2021, saving small businesses $218 million. The Small Business the Relief Act will also safeguard Maryland business owners against any tax increase triggered by the receipt of state loan or grant funds, which will help small businesses keep an additional $40 million in their bank accounts. All of this targeted relief will help businesses keep their doors open and keep more people on the payroll. Since this crisis began 10 months ago, our administration has aggressively and repeatedly taken actions which assisted individuals and small businesses who were struggling as a result of the pandemic and to prevent the collapse of our state's economy. Those previous executive actions I've already taken have totaled more than $700 million in emergency economic relief to the Marylanders and small businesses who needed it the most. We provided $220 million in grants and forgivable loans to Maryland small businesses, $108 million in emergency tax relief, $80 million in relief specifically for bars and restaurants, $50 million for the hospitality industry, $40 million for healthcare providers, $35 million for entertainment venues, $30 million through our layoff aversion fund, protecting 21,000 jobs, $10 million for low-interest loans to small and minority businesses, $10 million for farmers, watermen, and producers, $7 million for local arts organizations. We have made rental assistance one of our highest priorities, backing up one of the strongest eviction moratoriums in the country with $90 million in relief for rental payments, legal services, and affordable housing. We have directed $20 million to Maryland food banks and boosted the temporary cash assistance benefit for 62,000 Marylanders. On top of the more than $700 million which we have already announced, this new Relief Act emergency package brings us to more than $1.7 billion in state emergency economic relief for Marylanders and small businesses. In addition, after 8 months of urging leaders in Washington to act, Congress finally reached a bipartisan consensus on the federal relief package, which will allow us to provide Marylanders with an additional $15 billion of COVID-19 economic relief. In addition, $10 billion in Paycheck Protection Program funding will be provided through the CARES Act, and an additional $4 billion in individual assistance funding, including direct stimulus checks for Marylanders, as well as enhanced unemployment and SNAP benefits. Last week, Maryland became the first state in the nation to begin accepting claims for the extended federal unemployment programs. And we have already paid out $105 million in those benefits. Prior to all of this new relief, we have already paid out $8.7 billion in unemployment benefits to more than 709,000 Marylanders. Beginning this month, Maryland SNAP recipients will now receive an additional 15% increase in their benefits. We also are able to provide another $400 million in rental assistance, which we will be able to use to help further immediate relief for rent and utility bills. Businesses will receive an additional $7 billion from the through the federal bill, including another round of the Paycheck Protection Program. The federal bill provides Maryland with an additional $1.2 billion for education, $130 million more for child care, and $250 million for the transportation sector. This is critical, much needed funding. And once we receive all of the federal guidance which is required, we will work to get these funds out the door as quickly as possible. Last year, the direct actions I took by executive order, along with these federal relief programs, helped a great deal. This targeted Relief Act of 2021 will provide even more targeted emergency direct relief to fill in the gaps that still remain. With the start of the new 2021 legislative session beginning on Wednesday, we are now asking the legislative branch to assist by immediately passing this stimulus and tax relief package to help even more struggling families and small businesses across our state. We will be introducing the Relief Act of 2021 as emergency legislation on day one of the session on Wednesday. We will ask both houses of the legislature to act on it immediately so that I can sign it into law immediately and that these relief measures can take effect and we can immediately get these much needed dollars out the door and into the pockets of those who desperately need it. We look forward to working with legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle to pass this emergency legislation. I cannot imagine anything that could possibly be more important for the legislature to pass. Every day that goes by without passing a stimulus and tax relief package means more jobs that will be lost, more families who will lose their homes, and more businesses who will go out of business, and more people that suffer. Struggling Marylanders and small businesses who are barely hanging on cannot afford the kind of partisan bickering and needless delay that we have seen in Washington. For 6 years, Maryland has been setting an example for the nation of how respectful and effective government can work across the aisle together in order to find bipartisan common sense solutions. And my hope is that the legislature will join us in quickly pushing for this much needed emergency stimulus and tax relief package, and that they will work together with us in a bipartisan way as we guide our state through this pandemic and this economic crisis together. I'm a lifelong small businessman who had never held elective office before. In 2014, I stepped up to run for governor because I was so frustrated. 43 consecutive tax hikes had caused our state to lose thousands of businesses and hundreds of thousands of jobs. I pledged to work to grow small businesses and to put more people to work, let people keep more of their own money in their pockets, and to turn our economy around. And we did exactly what we said we would do. We took Maryland's overall economic performance from 49th out of 50 states to one of the best in America. More businesses were opened and more Marylanders were working than at any other time in the history of the state. And we had the greatest economic turnaround in America. But the events of the past 10 months have wreaked havoc on America's economy, and Maryland, while doing better than many other states, has not been immune from economic suffering. We've already taken some of the most aggressive actions in America to ease the blow of the national recession on our struggling families and small businesses, and to help them stay afloat during this extremely difficult time. Maryland's economy has proven to be resilient during this crisis, keeping more of our businesses open and recovering and creating jobs at one of the fastest rates in America. But in spite of that, there are still many struggling and truly in need. And I want the people of this great state to know that in the months ahead, no one will fight harder on behalf of our struggling Marylanders, our struggling families and small businesses. And we're going to continue to do whatever it takes in order to restore our economy, to put Marylanders back to work, and to ensure that our state, once again, has the greatest economic turnaround in America. With that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
Governor Hogan, where is this money coming from? And did you secure, you talked to the Democrats, did they say they're totally on board with this?
The money's coming from a variety of places. First of all, much of it is coming from the budget actions that we took earlier in the year at the Board of Public Works. Some of it is coming from our reserve fund, which is doing better than we anticipated because of our recovery, doing better than we expected. And a small portion of it to pay for unemployment is coming from the rainy day fund. I think about $100 million of the $1 billion. And so we talked in general terms with the legislature. I think we're all in agreement that the legislative session should focus on economic relief, and we'll be hopefully getting everybody on board with moving forward as quickly as possible.
So the amount to individuals and to families, that's been the big debate across the country, right? How much? The franchise has suggested $2,000. How did you come up with those two numbers, the 450 and the 750?
Well, that's only one tiny sliver of what I just talked about out of $1 billion. But the $2,000 checks that Francho was talking about are simply not possible. We don't have the power to just write $2,000 checks, number one. Number two, he was talking about draining the entire rainy day fund of the state. We chose to follow the directions of the Spending Affordability Committee and the legislature in maintaining our rainy day fund. We want to maintain our AAA bond rating, and we want to make sure that the state government continues to function. So we believe this is actually getting more money in the hands of more people that need it and getting it out much faster without taking irresponsible actions.
Governor, I apologize if I missed it. Can you describe the eligibility for those payments again?
Which payments?
From 750 and 450.
So these are going to, maybe Mark Nicole, you want to talk about who would be eligible?
Thank you, Governor. So the eligibility for the $750 and $450 payments are tied to Marylanders who have qualified for the Earned Income Tax Credit in 2019, and those who will be eligible for it in 2020.
So these are the lowest income Marylanders who get that assistance. It's in addition to and separate from the additional federal, which, I think in the coming weeks, we're also going to see that increase.
Governor, given the tough budget situation ahead of you, can you go into a little bit of detail about how you intend to pay for this and what other sorts of priorities might not get funded in order to make sure that these transparency?
Well, we have a couple of weeks. I think January 20th, we roll out our budget. We think we're going to continue to be able to fund all the most important functions of government. We thought this was very important to keep our economy going, and it was a fiscally prudent way to go about it.
I'm sorry, where is the money coming from?
I just answered her question on that. It's coming from a variety of different places. Most of it is money we've already recognized by savings from the cuts that we took at the Board of Public Works. Some of it is coming from the reserve fund, which is much higher than we anticipated because the economy is starting to do a little better, and about $100 million of it is coming from the rainy day fund.
Thank you, sir.
Does the rent assistance also pick up mortgage assistance, or are home lenders just backing up?
I think this money is specifically for rental assistance and not mortgages.
Will there be kind of a research into looking for homeowner assistance later down the line?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the things we have to do. I think it's one of the things they're looking at with the new bill that they're talking about in Washington.
Governor Hogan, can you talk about unemployment? I know you mentioned this as well. We're still seeing some issues with the unemployment system, and I know you've talked a lot about how you increase workers and whatnot, but we're still getting flooded with calls from people. What is the problem? Just the overwhelmed system? Is there not enough people working? What's going on?
I think we're doing better than almost any other state in America. It is a big problem in that hundreds of thousands of people are being paid billions of dollars in spite of, we were the first to set up a computer system to handle all of them. We were the first ones to now be accepting these checks. We're moving at a much faster rate than almost every other state in the country. But there's still about 4% of the people that haven't gotten paid yet, and that's because they have very complex problems that are going to take many, many months to resolve. We have a law that requires us to not just deny them, but to spend perhaps months or a year going through an appeals process, and that's what most of that is about. But we've taken care of 94, 96%, and paid out 709,000 people $8.7 billion. So I'm sure you will continue to hear for years that people have said, I didn't get my unemployment check, because many people are not going to get one.
Governor, if I may pivot for a minute, since you last held a press conference, threats against state capitals and Republican leaders who don't go along with President Trump are escalating. There's apparently a group planning an attack on state capitals soon. Have you fielded threats against this state house, your administration, and have you added additional security measures since the last vote?
So we are taking additional security measures here at the State House complex, both the Capitol Police and the Maryland State Police. I have a security team briefing later this afternoon, not only to talk about the situation in Maryland, but our additional assistance in Washington with all of our allied police forces in Maryland and with our National Guard, which we've increased the number of and the mission for. I have a call this afternoon with Governor Northam and Mayor Bowser to talk about coordination in the region. We're setting up a meeting with the FBI who wants to brief me. So in addition to the start of the legislative session and massive vaccination rollout, and dealing with the COVID numbers. We're also dealing with tons of security issues, both here in the state and in our nation's capital. And we're going to be continuing to work on that, day and night between now and probably the inauguration.
How would you describe the state, your posture in readiness to assist with the inauguration? And whatever may come this weekend in D.C.?
Well, we, 'cause Maryland and many of our police departments and the whole state and the Guard are always somewhat involved in inaugurations. This is obviously a much more heightened situation. We have already 500 Guard members in the city. We've beefed up our police presence, and I think we're going to be increasing several hundred more Guard members after we finish our discussions. There's now a lot of talk and coordination between all the federal agencies and all of the regional partners. So hopefully everybody will be able to be prepared.
Governor, a number of lawmakers in your own party are talking about the possibility of legislation that would require you or a future governor to come to the legislature to extend the 30-day state of emergency. Can you talk a little bit about, does the legislature need additional power to check the governor on states of emergency?
Well, that would be about probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, because if you have the whole purpose of the Constitution setting it up that way, the reason we have this in statute is if you have an emergency and it's a state of emergency, you can't wait a year for the legislature to come back and ask permission. You have to take action like that day, not to have it debated for 90 days or say, well, there's another legislative session in 9 months. You can't take emergency powers away from the people that have to take immediate actions, which we've been taking now for 10 months.
Is it going to be possible to move as quickly as you want on this package without having pre-negotiated or struck an agreement with Senators, Assembly?
I know that everybody believes it's important. I'm sure there are going to be, some discussions about tweaks and things that everybody, I think, generally agrees with most of the things we're talking about. There may be additional things or things they'd rather do this instead of that, and we're looking forward to those discussions. But we can't waste a lot of time. We can't. This is not something that should be debated until the end of the legislative session in April. In the meantime, we're losing thousands of businesses and tens of thousands of people losing their jobs and their homes.
Last question.
If the legislature continues to debate this and the negotiations take longer than you're willing to wait, are you ready to go at this alone?
Well, so we took every action that we could take alone. These tax changes and the things that we're talking about that extend beyond the state of emergency, the legislature must pass the legislation. That's why they're in this package. We would have taken these actions already. I know there's talk from the comptroller about we just send everybody checks. Well, that's just not the way the law works. This requires an act of the legislature.
Should the National Guard be armed in the district?
I think they probably should, yeah.
Thank you.